Mother's love is said to be unconditional. But what if it comes with terms and favorites? This isn't just another family story. It's a quiet war between two sisters raised under the same roof, but never under the same love. One lived for approval. The other lived for applause. And their mother? She clapped the loudest for the one holding the knife. Where duty was invisible, beauty was worshipped, and betrayal wore your own sister's smile. This is how the story began. Abigail was the first daughter of Mama Grace, a girl whose life was shaped by duty, sacrifice, and silent endurance. From a young age, Abigail believed that if she worked hard enough, love would follow. She swept their compound before sunrise. She sold tomatoes under the sun until her skin peeled. She never answered back, not even when Mama called her slow or useless. All she ever wanted was peace, and Eric, her fiancé. Eric was her beginning and her prayer point. A mechanic with greasy hands and the purest smile that he'd always say, "When I blow, Abigail, you'll never lift a finger again." And she believed him. She gave him everything. Money saved from market sales, food she hid for him, even the gold chain her late father left her. She was the one who sent him to the city to learn a better trade. He cried when he left. And she waited like a wife waits, heart first, shame second. But in the same house lived Chloe, the younger sister. Ah, Chloe. She walked like the world owed her a spotlight. Mini skirts, loud makeup, bold words. She never worked a day, yet her purse always jingled with money. And Mama clapped for her like she was a visiting queen. My baby girl knows how to shine. Not like Abigail, carrying suffering on her head like wrapper. It hurt. But Abigail stayed silent. Everything changed the day Eric returned from Lagos. He came back driving a fine car with city swagger and a mouth full of big grammar. But when he saw Abigail, his eyes softened. He called her my Abigail and embraced her tightly in front of everyone. For the first time in her life, Mama looked at Abigail with something close to pride. But Chloe, she looked at Eric like he was her next handbag. That night, Abigail saw Chloe whispering with Mama by the kitchen fire. Their laughter was low. Too low. And slowly things began to shift. Eric stopped looking at Abigail with warmth. He started avoiding her eyes. Chloe began wearing perfume at night. Then one morning Abigail overheard her mother say, "Use what you have and take what's yours." Abigail has always been too soft. Later that week Abigail returned from the market to see Chloe and Eric on the veranda, laughing and sharing roasted corn, just the way Abigail and Eric used to. She dropped the basket. Her knees gave out. Mama didn't even blink. "He chose what he wants," Mama said almost casually. "Move on, Abigail. Be smart." And just like that her sister became her replacement. And her mother? She organized the introduction ceremony with a smile on her face. The day Chloe became the bride-to-be, Abigail became a stranger in her own story. The compound buzzed with noise. Women cooked and gossiped. Children ran barefoot with powder on their cheeks. Mama Grace tied her best wrapper and danced like her dreams had finally come true. She didn't dance for Abigail. She danced for the daughter who had taken everything from her other child, and made her feel proud doing it. Abigail stood near the doorway. Her hands were covered in flour. Her heart covered in cracks. She wasn't asked to help plan the ceremony. But she kneaded dough, scrubbed pots, and arranged chairs. Because that's who she was. The one who stayed quiet. The one who kept giving. No one noticed how her eyes refused to blink whenever Chloe called Eric babe. No one noticed how tightly she held her chest when Mama Grace said, "Chloe is finally marrying well, thank God." Not one soul asked Abigail how she was doing. That evening, when Chloe showed off her engagement ring to the neighbors, Eric stood beside her like a trophy. The same man Abigail had fed, supported, prayed for. Now smiling beside her sister. Like the past never existed. But the worst part? Mama Grace laughed the loudest. She said, "This is what happens when a girl knows her worth." And looked straight at Abigail. Abigail felt the air disappear from her lungs. So that night before the wedding she packed her bag. One wrapper. One pair of slippers. A purse with a few naira. And she walked out of that compound without looking back. Nobody called after her. Nobody stopped her. Not even Mama. The next chapter of Abigail's life didn't start with magic. It started with a job as a cleaner in a town where nobody knew her pain. She didn't talk much. She didn't smile often. But she worked, quietly and thoroughly. Until one night Ken was rushed in. A car crash had almost taken his life. Abigail was the only one who stayed calm. She held pressure on the bleeding, she stayed calm when everyone else panicked and stayed by his side till dawn. Ken survived, and he never forgot the girl who didn't flinch when everyone else panicked. Days passed. Then weeks. That evening, Ken passed by the clinic like he had done many times before. He didn't stop. He just watched from inside his car as Abigail stepped out quietly, holding her bag tightly like it was the only thing she owned. She didn't take a bike. She didn't enter any bus. She started walking. And Ken followed her slowly in his car, keeping a little distance. He just wanted to see where she went. He had been curious about her, this calm, hard-working woman who smiled like life hadn't dealt her hard blows. She walked far. Through busy streets. Across a narrow bridge. Behind some old mechanic shops. Then she turned into a lonely path, one that didn't look safe. Still she walked with her head high, not afraid, not weak. Finally she entered an uncompleted building. No roof. No door. Just blocks and cement. Ken parked and watched from a distance. He saw her push aside 2 planks and go into one corner. There was an old mat. A plastic bag with clothes. A small flask for water. That was where Abigail slept. His heart sank. This girl who worked all day and still smiled at everyone was sleeping in a place like that. He didn't get out of the car. He just sat there shocked. And angry, not at her but at the people who let her suffer like this. The next day he waited outside the clinic. When Abigail finished her shift he walked up to her. "Hi Abigail," he said quietly. She was surprised. "I followed you yesterday," he added. "I wanted to know where you lived. I'm sorry but I had to see for myself." Abigail looked away. She didn't know what to say. Her face was filled with shame. But Ken wasn't there to shame her. "I saw how far you walked. I saw the building. And I also saw something else, strength. You're strong, Abigail. You're living in a hard place but you haven't let it break you." Still she stayed quiet. "I'm not here to feel sorry for you," he said gently. "I'm here because I respect you. I want to be someone who stands with you, not someone who takes from you." That night when Abigail got home she cried for the first time in a long while. Not because she was in pain, but because someone finally saw her. Not as a burden, not as second best, but as someone worth loving. Weeks turned into months. Ken helped her find a small one-room apartment. It wasn't fancy but it had a roof. A bed. A door she could lock. He bought her decent shoes. Helped her pay for evening classes. He didn't rush her. He didn't force anything. He just stayed close. Encouraged her. One day she opened up. She told him everything, about Mama Grace, Chloe and Eric. When she finished he held her hand and said, "You were never the problem. You were just surrounded by people who didn't know your value." That day Abigail smiled. A real smile. 3 years later Ken asked her to marry him. She said yes. Not because she needed someone to save her, but because she had finally healed enough to choose love again. That same month they planned a visit back to her village. She thought it would just be a short visit, to greet Mama and move on. But what she found waiting back home was something she never expected. Abigail didn't say a word when she and Ken pulled up at Mama Grace's house. She stood tall, dressed in calm dignity, a far cry from the girl who once lived in this compound with silent tears. The woman beside Ken was healed, but not forgetful. Chloe was at the doorway. Her eyes met Abigail's for only a second before she looked away. Her belly was round. Her beauty faded, replaced with tiredness. But Abigail didn't speak yet. She just watched, as if waiting for the truth to walk out on its own. And soon it did. That evening, after Ken stepped outside to make a call, Mama Grace sat quietly on the wooden bench, her hands folded. She didn't speak much either. Maybe guilt was a language she never learned. And Chloe? She finally sat down too. Her voice was low. And this time there was no perfume. No makeup. No pride. Just pain. "I didn't plan to take him," she started. "I just wanted what you had. The way he held you. Looked at you. I wanted that." But what she got was something else. She told them everything. Eric had already gotten married 2 months ago before he returned to the village. A full wedding in Lagos. Real wife. Real guests. 2 children already. And 1 more on the way. He came to the village to escape his new responsibilities. But Chloe, bold and persistent, fell for the version of him that wasn't even real. He didn't plan to marry her. But she pushed and flirted and Mama clapped. So he agreed, only because he thought it was easy. The car he drove? Borrowed. The clothes? Borrowed. Even the ring he used during the introduction? Borrowed from a friend. He never took me to his house, Chloe said, eyes welling up. We only met at hotels. He always had one excuse or the other. Whenever she wanted to visit him in Lagos, he shouted. Sometimes slapped her. He said I was too loud. Too clingy. Too emotional. Everything I did annoyed him. But then came the day everything broke. She found out she was pregnant. When she told him, he stopped picking her calls. Days passed. Then weeks. Desperate, she contacted one of Eric's close friends. That friend, maybe out of pity, gave her an address. She packed her things and traveled to Lagos by herself. She found the house. Knocked. The woman who opened the door was pregnant, just like her. At first, the woman smiled, thinking Chloe was a visitor from the church. But when Chloe said, "Please, I'm looking for Eric. I'm his wife," the woman's smile dropped. She led Chloe inside. There on the wall was a big framed wedding picture. Eric, in a suit, smiling, standing beside the same woman now standing in front of Chloe. Chloe's knees gave out. She sat on the floor, shaking, her whole body cold. "I don't understand," the woman asked. "Who are you?" Chloe couldn't speak. Her mouth opened. But nothing came out. That was the day her world fell apart. She came back to the village a few days later. And Eric? He never returned. Abigail listened quietly. She didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She just said softly, "You wanted what I had. But what I had wasn't even real." Mama Grace covered her face with her hands. Chloe's shoulders shook as she cried. And in that silence the applause ended. All that was left was the sound of truth. The village grew smaller in the rearview mirror as Ken drove. Abigail sat beside him, her hands folded on her lap, staring out the window. She didn't speak much. Not because there was nothing to say, but because too much had already been said. Ken glanced at her from time to time. He didn't rush her. He knew healing wasn't loud. Sometimes, it looked like a woman finally leaving the village where her heart was first broken. With her head high, they drove for hours, past fields, past dusty signboards. Finally, as they approached the city, Ken cleared his throat gently. "I was thinking," he said, "you don't have to go back to cleaning if you don't want to." Abigail turned to him, surprised. "What do you mean?" "I mean, the evening classes you took? You passed them. And I know someone, she runs a small hospital, needs someone with your discipline. They'll train you to be a health assistant." Abigail's mouth parted slightly. "Health assistant?" He nodded. "It's not cleaning. It's not easy either. But it's a start. A new start." She looked away, blinking fast. "Why are you doing all this for me?" Ken smiled. "As I see you, Abigail. I see who you are, and I know what you're capable of." That night they arrived home. Abigail cooked quietly. Ken set the table. For the first time in a long time, her hands didn't feel like they were only made to serve. They felt like they were building something new. A week later she started her new job. White coat. Clean shoes. Name badge. No longer a cleaner. Now someone who helped others heal, even as she still healed too. And the patients? They loved her. Especially one girl, barely 10, who wouldn't let anyone dress her wound except Nurse Abigail. One evening after work, Abigail stood in front of a mirror and touched her reflection gently. No scars showed. But she knew where each one lived. And somehow they no longer hurt like before. But then, the phone rang. A call from the village. Mama Grace had fallen ill. Nothing serious, but enough to cause whispers. And Chloe? She was struggling. Heavily pregnant. Alone. Ken entered the room and saw Abigail holding the phone quietly. "Do you want to go?" he asked. Abigail didn't answer immediately. Then she nodded. "I think I need to. Not just to help, but to face everything without fear. Because when a woman finally knows her worth, going back doesn't mean staying. It just means she's no longer afraid of where she started." The journey back to the village didn't feel the same. Abigail wasn't afraid this time. There was no lump in her throat. No weight in her chest. Only silence and strength. The quiet kind, the kind that grows after years of being broken. Ken offered to follow her. But she looked at him and smiled gently. This one I have to walk alone. He understood. When she reached the compound, the sky was gray, like it knew a storm had already passed, but the ground hadn't healed yet. Mama Grace lay on a wooden bed in the corner of the sitting room. Her skin looked tired. Her voice thin. But her eyes, still sharp. When Abigail entered, Mama turned her head slowly. You came, she said, barely above a whisper. I heard you were sick, Abigail replied, kneeling beside the mat. They didn't embrace. They didn't cry. They just looked at each other. Not as mother and daughter, but as two women holding too many memories between them. Abigail didn't speak much. She fetched water. Sat quietly. Waited. But Mama kept watching her. Staring like she wanted to say something, but didn't know how. Then one night when the house was quiet and the kerosene lamp burned low, she finally did. Abigail, she whispered. Abigail looked up from the mat. There's something I never told you. The room went still. Mama Grace's voice cracked as she began. I wasn't always like this, you know. Once I was just a girl full of dreams. I was the first daughter of this family. Beautiful. Proud. People said I was going to do big things. But life happened. I got pregnant, with your sister Grace. And the shame nearly killed me. Then I met someone. A good man who wanted to marry me. I was afraid to tell him I already had a child. So I begged my younger sister Rose. I begged her to help me, to take Grace, raise her like her own just for a little while. I promised I'd fix things. Rose, she didn't hesitate. She said yes. She was already married, living in the city. She took Grace in. Loved her. Tried. But Grace was difficult. Rebellious. Always in trouble. Rose did everything she could, but it wasn't enough. One day she called me and said, before this child destroys our bond, take her back. So I did. But when Grace came home, she twisted everything. She said Rose never treated her well. That she was beaten. Starved. Unloved. And I believed her. I didn't ask Rose. I didn't even give her a chance to explain. I let my heart harden. I stopped speaking to my sister, my own blood. I carried bitterness and I let it grow. Not long after, a friend came visiting. She had just returned from abroad. She heard Grace's story, the lies, and said, let me take her. I'll give her a better life. I didn't even ask questions. The next day, Grace packed her things and left with the woman. That was the last time I ever saw her. No letters. No phone calls. Nothing. Then, tragedy came. Rose died shortly after giving birth to you. There was no one else. So I took you. But it wasn't love that made me take you. It was guilt. And anger. And I made a vow in my heart that day. This child will never know joy. Not under my roof. Not while I live. I smiled in public. I played the good aunt. But inside I punished you. I blamed you for everything. And you just kept loving me. Her voice broke. Tears ran down her cheeks for the first time in years. Abigail didn't speak. She couldn't. She felt like someone had cut open the past and laid every wound bare. The room stayed quiet. Just the two of them. A dying mother. And a daughter raised under shadows. Mama Grace reached for her hand. I'm sorry, Abigail. For everything. For not protecting you. For not seeing you. For letting my pain become your punishment. Abigail looked down at the hand. Then at the face. This was the woman who gave her life. And also the woman who had taken so much of it. She whispered. Thank you for telling me. Then she stood up, walked outside, and let the night air carry away the tears she had been holding in for years. After that long night, after Mama Grace's confession, something changed in the air. Abigail didn't shout. She didn't storm out or curse. She just sat with the truth. Quietly. Stronger than before. The next morning she packed Mama Grace's wrapper, her slippers, and her old handbag. You're coming with me, she said. Mama looked confused. To where? To the city. You need proper care. You can't stay here and rot. Mama Grace's lips trembled. Her eyes misty with disbelief. But Abigail didn't wait for approval. She arranged transport. Called Ken. And made space in her world for the woman who never made space for her. When they arrived at the city clinic, the nurses took Mama Grace in like royalty. Not because of who she was, but because of who Abigail had become. As for Chloe, her silence said more than her pain. But Abigail didn't ask for an apology. She just showed up. "You'll give birth in the best hospital," she told her. "And you won't lack anything. Not while I'm here." Chloe cried. Not loud, but deeply. She had lost everything, the man, the dream, the glow. But now, standing beside the sister she once betrayed, she felt a strange kind of love. Undeserved but freely given. One evening, while Mama Grace was resting on her hospital bed, Abigail sat beside her, spooning warm pap into her mouth. There was a silence between them. Not heavy anymore, just real. Then Abigail asked softly, "Where is my father?" The air tensed. Mama Grace blinked slowly. "He's alive," she said. "But he's never asked of you." Abigail's hands froze. "After I gave birth, I heard he got married to someone else. I didn't tell him about you. I was scared. Then later, when he found out, his new wife didn't want anything to do with you. So he stayed away." Abigail swallowed hard. So the man who gave her life chose silence. He lived his life, married, had children, while she walked barefoot under the sun, searching for love that never looked back. "He had his reasons," Mama added. "But it doesn't excuse it." Abigail didn't respond. She didn't need another apology. She didn't want revenge. She had already become the kind of woman none of them imagined she could be. That night, Abigail stood by the window of her apartment. Ken walked in carrying dinner. He paused beside her, looked at her face. "You okay?" She nodded. "I've been through too much to not be okay now." Then she looked at him, really looked at him. "Thank you, for waiting. For seeing me. For choosing me." Ken smiled and took her hand. "It was never hard to choose you, Abigail. The hard part was watching others not see what I saw." The clinic floor smelled like fresh polish and lavender. Abigail now walked with quiet power, in smart heels with a stethoscope gently swinging around her neck, and a team of nurses behind her who called her Ma with deep respect. She had been promoted to Director of Operations, the youngest ever in that hospital's history. But none of it changed her heart. That night, while Ken made pepper soup and humming filled their small apartment, Abigail spoke softly. "I want to find her." Ken turned. "Find who?" "Grace. My mother's first child. My cousin's sister. The one she gave away." He paused. "Are you sure?" She nodded. "She deserves to be seen. Even if it's just once." Ken used every contact he had. He traced documents, reached out to embassies, followed every thread until finally a location came in. Grace was in Enugu. Married. 3 children. But life hadn't been kind. Her husband drank. Her face had grown old from struggle. She worked in a small local clinic, not as a nurse but as a janitor. Abigail traveled alone. When Grace opened the door and saw her, elegant, glowing, calm, she didn't recognize her. Abigail smiled gently. "My name is Abigail. Mama Grace is my mother too. And she never stopped thinking of you." Grace froze. The name Mama Grace landed like a stone in her chest. "I thought she forgot about me." "She never did," Abigail said. "But even if she had, I didn't." A week later, Mama Grace turned 65. The house was decorated quietly. Nothing extravagant. Just peace. Chloe had given birth to a baby girl 2 months ago. Ken was holding the baby, cooing. Abigail walked in holding someone's hand. "Mama, there's someone here to see you." Mama looked up from her chair and saw Grace. Time stood still. The woman she gave away. The face she had only remembered in guilt and dreams. Mama's hand trembled. Tears rolled down before a word came out. Grace knelt down. "I don't know if I came to forgive or be forgiven, but I came." And Mama Grace, with all the strength she had left, got up and wrapped her arms around her first daughter. They cried together. Abigail stepped back watching them. Ken came close and whispered, "You gave your mother the best birthday gift anyone could give. Healing." Abigail smiled. But deep in her heart, she knew there was still one more door to knock on. Abigail didn't just walk into a better life. She carried others with her. Her father didn't say much, but he stood beside her on her wedding day, held her hand down the aisle, proud and quiet. And for Abigail that was enough. After her wedding to Ken there was no loud party, no noisy crowd. Just a quiet, beautiful celebration filled with peace, respect, and real love, the kind she had waited for all her life. She didn't build her new life with bitterness. She built it with understanding. The first thing she did was find a decent apartment in town, not for herself but for Mama Grace and Chloe. Somewhere quiet with electricity, running water, and space to breathe. She didn't say much, just handed them the keys and said, "Nobody should live in shame when help can fix it." Mama Grace wept that day. Not from pain, but from the kind of guilt that knows it's been forgiven. For Chloe, Abigail did even more. She rented a shop space, furnished it, stocked it with goods. "No more waiting for anyone to carry you," she said. "Stand up for yourself now." Chloe couldn't speak. She just hugged Abigail and cried like a child. And Grace? The long-lost cousin who was once thrown into the arms of a stranger. Abigail made sure she didn't get lost again. She enrolled her in a proper trade program, sewing and fashion. Bought her materials, tools, and paid for her hostel fees. "You may not have had a mother," she told Grace, "but you'll never lack a sister." Ken stood by Abigail through it all. Not once did he ask her, "Why are you doing so much for people who didn't do the same for you?" Because he understood, Abigail wasn't doing it for them. She was doing it for herself. To heal completely. To start over clean. To make sure the cycle of pain ended with her. And in that small family, once torn apart by lies and favoritism, something new began to grow. Peace. They weren't perfect. They didn't forget the past. But they learned how to live beyond it. And Abigail? She finally had what she'd always deserved. A home where her love was enough. A family that no longer competed but completed one another. And a heart that, after everything, still chose grace over grudges. Life won't always give you the love you deserve from the people you expect. But that doesn't mean you won't find it. Abigail's story reminds us that healing is possible, that forgiveness is strength, and that when you rise above pain with grace, you don't just change your life, you change the lives of everyone around you. Thanks for watching.